I'm Kimberly Brusk. I'm 34 years old, and I'm mother to a 7-year-old daughter named Paige. But I'm also a gun violence and domestic violence survivor. I moved the 821 miles from my very small town in western Michigan to Atlanta while my ex-husband was in prison. I needed to establish a geographical boundary between my soon-to-be paroled ex-husband and my family. I needed to feel safe, and I don't feel safe. I was in a 10-year abusive marriage. I was abused physically, sexually, emotionally, financially. The abuse and the violence escalated over a decade, but my breaking point was in October 2009. I filed for divorce and I got a protection order. I told my then husband that I was leaving him and I was taking our then 3-year-old daughter with me. He physically assaulted me. I called the police. I'd had enough. He was arrested, he was jailed, and then he was released on bond for domestic assault. I got another protection order. 4 days later, I came home late in the evening to find my house dark. I had left the lights on. I walked in my front door and I found, when I turned my lights on, that my husband had broken into my home and he was laying in wait for me with a shotgun in his hands. He bought the guns at Walmart on the way there, or shotgun shells. My husband fired that shotgun and I ran out my front door. I called to the neighbors, and from my position, crouched in my neighbor's hedges in the dark, I called the police as I heard him flee out the back door with his gun in tow. After a 3-hour armed pursuit for my husband, he was apprehended and arrested again, this time for 4 felonies. Early that morning, the police finally escorted me back into my home. They showed me a 12-inch hole in my door frame that was left by the shotgun blast.
Hold it up.
It was hard for me not to imagine that hole, that huge shotgun blast, killing me, or one of the brave responding officers that night, or worse, my then 3-year-old daughter. My ex-husband should not have had a gun. He not only had a history of domestic abuse, but he had a long history of mental illness. It was too easy for my ex-husband to own a gun without a background check. Even now, my ex-husband, a 3-time felon with a history of domestic violence and mental illness, can go to a gun show or check the classifieds and buy a gun without a background check. And so I moved 800 miles to feel safe, but I don't feel safe. Senator Isakson, I don't feel safe. I'm a mother. I'm just a mother. I'm a mother, but I'm a voter. And I'm a mother who wants safety for her family and for other women and mothers who are at risk and are now in situations like I once was. I advocate for those women now. This is a public safety issue.
Yes, public safety issue.
Violence against women in the U.S. is directly related to our weak gun laws.
Yes.
A significant amount of gun violence in America, including the majority of mass shootings, are incidents of domestic and family violence. In 2010, more than half of the women murdered with guns in the U.S. were killed by their intimate partners or family members. Background checks are the only systematic way to stop felons, domestic abusers, and the dangerously mentally ill from buying firearms. Let's make it a little bit harder. Requiring a background check for every gun sale will save women's lives. In states that do require a background check for every gun sale, 38% fewer women are shot to death by their intimate partners. If Senator Isakson cares about reducing gun violence against women, he should support this bill. comprehensive, enforceable, and universal background checks. I understand hunters. My parents are gun owners. I took hunter safety when I was a child. I grew up around guns. I know that this is a complicated issue, but it's also a public safety issue. With that, I would like to read a statement by someone who couldn't be here today but very much wanted to express his views. His name is Peyton Williams, and I just got a recent revision of his speech, so you'll have to bear with me because I've only read it once. All right, so I'm Peyton Williams. Imagine a great big law officer. Okay. My name is Peyton Williams. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend today's event. I really wish to show my support. I'm a retired law officer, and I spent several years with a large metropolitan police department and later 5 years as chief of police in a small community. I'm also a gun owner. I currently own 4 firearms, including 2 semi-automatic pistols. My grandfather was an avid hunter, and he gave me my first rifle when I was 7 years old. I grew up with firearms and fully support responsible gun ownership. I strongly support universal background checks. I support the current compromised bill. Although it has loopholes, it will at least bring us closer to the type of check system that we need. The reasons for supporting such legislation are self-evident and just make common sense. The explanation given to oppose such laws tend to lack that common sense. Instead of explaining why I believe that inconvenience and some of the other arguments are inadequate, I will address one certain issue that is constantly brought up because I have years of personal experience with that very issue. A common statement we are given whenever gun control is brought up is that criminals will always get guns. Who's heard that? And there's some truth to that statement. But our current system makes it amazingly easy for criminals who should not be allowed to purchase firearms to obtain them. The view that we should not do anything because it won't work is ridiculous. Further, some will lead you to believe that there's this massive black market of illegal guns when in fact there's no such infrastructure in the United States because there's no demand. The idea that there lurks a shady person in a back alley selling illegal weapons is a joke. Why would a criminal, or anyone, risk the possibility of the police driving by and asking what they're doing at 3 a.m. in a dark alley? Or perhaps the guy who is going to sell you the gun simply knocks you on the head and takes your cash. Criminals and those who should not be allowed to purchase guns simply go to a gun show. They go online, or they look in the classifieds. What could be simpler? They don't require background checks. Certain people cry about the bad guys getting guns, but it seems to me we may just want to make this just a little more difficult. Obviously, we know the most vocal opponent of background checks or any gun safety legislation is the NRA. I was at one time an active member, but I quit many years ago when I realized the disturbing motivations and hypocrisy of the NRA leadership. They are paid technocrats that lobby for the sale of firearms and all associated adjuncts. They hide behind the Second Amendment and the Constitution because it sounds nobler than telling us that they are just gun salesmen. Being an active police officer at the time, I was particularly outraged when the NRA opposed the banning of what was referred to as a cop killer, or Teflon bullets, a high-velocity round that can penetrate body armor and has no other viable utility. I find it interesting that the NRA now has a newer version of their involvement in this issue that one might call a revisionist history. I call it blatant fabrication. NRA CEO Wayne LaPierre has testified at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in the wake of the '99 Columbine shooting that it was the NRA's position to support background checks as reasonable. Wayne said, "We believe it's reasonable to provide for instant background checks at gun shows, just like stores and pawn shops. If it was reasonable then, why is it not reasonable now?" I at least have not heard anyone from the NRA answer that question. Thank you.